Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to look at the new moon chart for March 29th, 2025. I'm using Washington, D.C. as I normally do, but today I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the chart for D.C. as much as I'm going to be looking at the Sun and Moon axis points and the Aries points so that it encompasses more of a worldwide view and more of what anybody could be experiencing at any place in the world. The only thing that I want to point out about this United States chart while I have it up is I really wanted to look at the fact that the Sun and the Moon are at 9 degrees even, while the ascendant is at 7 degrees 26 minutes. So with that said, you're looking at a Sun and the Moon on or around the ascendant of this chart. And to me, that's pretty illuminating considering a lot of what's going on right now. For example, we have a lot of protesting. And the moon, which often represents the people. So the people are protesting by the day, the sun. So the sun and the moon together not only denotes new beginnings, but it's a connection between the day and the people, or the day and the hour. And that's something that you might want to pay attention to, particularly if 9 degrees is a degree point that's pretty strong in your chart. I also want to point out that I've done other 9-degree points. This one is a solar eclipse, and I'm remembering a solar eclipse that took place that was 9 Libra. It was within the last couple years. So we're kind of on a cycle where we are kind of tying together events that have taken place during, obviously that was a spring, this spring. That was a fall eclipse, this one being a spring eclipse. So it's just interesting. I think it's a rate of about 2.5 years, and it could be about that. So kind of look at what's going on and how much it could be reminiscent of things that have been going on. Before I move from that, and I do want to point out that is right on the ascendant of the United States. I don't think you'd have to be living under a rock. And I mean, it doesn't matter where you are in the world that you know there are problems here. Big problems here. So big that I was reading an article about how people are protesting on both sides of the border, with Canada on one side and the United States on the other, and they're protesting the same thing, but a border across the border. So just some interesting things, because I believe that some of what's happening, because I think of moon and sun also as our connections, that I really believe that what's happening with all of this, I want to say bad stuff, because a lot of what's happening is not good and it doesn't have good outcome. And I think that what's happening is it's bringing people of the world together. So despite the fact that Canada might be protesting against our government, we're right there with them. So I know Germany, Switzerland, there's a lot of countries protesting right now, and I just want to say a big thank you, because we know that you stand with us, the people, and we, the people, have also come out to say that we don't approve of what's going on. So very interesting that this particular new moon, which is an eclipse, which means it started even before the 29th, which it's going on, it's very telling, very, very telling indeed. So moving into that, I want to talk about, I have a lot of notes. I want to talk about the fact that this particular sun-moon point directly squares within 41 minutes Cupido. Cupido could be families which are suffering right now, big time, like right up there at the midheaven too. It's like what the rest of the world is seeing is that, families under fire, but it's not just families. It's groups, such as veterans, such as women. So what you're seeing is families are affected, yes, but so are individual groups being affected. So I think that's really worth pointing out and making note of. Now, as I say this, please be aware that Cupido at 9 degrees 41 minutes is also going to be in that axis of the sun. So that means no one escapes this particular square, no matter where you live. So it not only squares that Cupido at the midheaven, but there's a couple other really interesting things here. And I'm going to get deeper involved in this chart as we go, but I just want to talk about the obvious. Mars at 22 Cancer 47 is in the Aries point as well. So it means that the anger, the aggression, the all the Mars-like stuff, the wars, because there are several, it's affecting the world. But something just also caught my eye, and considering some of what is going on in the world, and particularly because of some of the leaders that we have in the world, I find it really interesting that on this day, March 29th, 2025, which is literally only 4 days from now, is talking about this anger, this aggression, this warlike type energy. Now, it's interesting because it's in Cancer. That would be like domestic, but it is, but then again, remember, war and families, okay? So there is a lot here, and it's all everywhere. There's no rock you could be under that you wouldn't notice this. And the same thing with the stationing of Kronos, the next thing I'm talking about, which is the leaders, particularly those associated with the war efforts, which are a lot more countries, by the way, than are actually at war, okay? Just please be aware of that. Well, interestingly enough, today in the news, just a few days before, remember these are eclipses, they started already. We have had how our leaders, I'm using that term loosely because goodness knows they're not qualified, and the story proves it, have just been nailed for talking about war efforts in a commercial app where inadvertently they invited a reporter. Fortunately, a reporter with a lot of ethics, but a reporter nonetheless. That's like a major leak. Now, that affects, with that Mars, everybody in the world, okay? Because these wars, these war efforts affect the whole world. I think that's something that we now understand more in this 21st century than maybe we ever did before. That we understand now that if there's a war over there, it still affects us over here. And the interesting thing is the knuckleheaded move made by these cabinet members, these military people with their lack of experience, has really just, I just had to point it out because it's so obvious in astrology. I don't know if you can see it, but there's an S with that Kronos. Now, when a planet goes retrograde or when it goes back to direct, there's always going to be a day at the very beginning where it looks to be completely stopped or stationary. And right now, that planet is Kronos. It's now very stationary, okay? And I also want to point out that it's less than 2 degrees away from Hades. Bad decisions made by people in authority. The problem is that Mars is at the Aries point, and it affects everybody. So I had to point that out. I think that's really important to understand with everything else that's going on. I'm going to also just from the perspective of Washington, tell you that money issues with Uranus in the second house could change. Well, they are. And the Adamitas there also is, and they're not in aspect. Okay, so that, not yet anyway, they will be. They're not yet in aspect, but it still is, it's like money is going to be tight because of the Adamitas. And I think I say that in every chart. Now, Adamitas is not at the Aries point, and neither is Uranus. That is strictly a United States issue, but I do know that if the United States is now going to be really having some money issues, that it does ultimately affect the rest of the world. It's 332 million people. I mean, it's definitely going to affect the world. There's no way it couldn't. So I wanted to bring up those points because I think that of all the things going on in the chart right now, therein lies some of the most important. Okay, now I'm going to just start with the Aries point because I can do it right in this chart, and then I'll go to a dial. But I want to talk about at the Aries point, we have two things that are really important to look at. Okay, we have a 2957 Neptune, 3 minutes, which means in the next day or so it's crossing into Aries. 3 minutes away. And then down here, we have Mercury at 0 Aries. Okay, so you've got two planets showing up at the Aries point. Now, they may not be considered an aspect because I'm a Uranian astrologer, and quite frankly, they're out of sign. And they are, well, they are an aspect. But they're an aspect by, I'm going to say 30 some minutes, okay? 33 minutes or something. So they're an aspect. They're not an exact conjunct, but they're about 30 minutes away. It means that Mercury's passing over there probably on the 28th or sometime during the night. They are going to be conjunct. Okay, what does Neptune and Mercury mean? And I'm going to talk to any astrologer now. Please, anybody out there can probably answer this. Neptune and Mercury is lies, quite honestly. It's disinformation. It's being misdirected. You're being lied to. We are being lied to. It's in the 12th house of the United States chart. But again, it's the Aries point, people. The world is being lied to by the United States. Well, definitely. But what else is involved in that? And how many other people would then be affected by those lies? Okay, other leaders I'm referring to. Okay. Again, we got lies and we got Mars, anger. We have lies and aggression. Do you see where it's going? Could we have lies about war? Are there lies about these wars? I'm going to put dollars on it. I bet you that we do. Are we going to find out all of the lies? I don't know about all of them, but I think we're going to become more aware. We're going to wake up a little bit. Okay. So you have to realize that right now, in this very moment that you and I are sitting here, that we have this big conglomeration of planets, and I'm just going to point them out: Saturn, node, Venus, Neptune, Mercury, okay? They're all like right there at this, they're all going to be moving into or over this Aries point. We are going to feel each of these points at some time. I think by the 31st, you've got not so much the node because it reverses. So the node's already passed over the Aries point. So I do want to take that. It's in there now because it's in the grouping, which means, you know, how much can we trust people, even people we love, even people that are close to us? How much can we trust the structures in our lives? And again, I'm talking to the world here. Can we trust our governments? Can we trust our systems? I know in the United States we can't. But I guess what's happening here is making, it's like we're an example and the rest of the world is looking at us and they're saying, maybe we should start questioning things. So with that said, that being a big part of it, then I want to move on because those things are really important. And I'm going to move on and I'm going to talk about some other things that are showing up here, like in the Aries point. I'm going to stay with the Aries point, okay? Not everything is going to be on this dial, but let's look at the dial, okay? Again, I want to point out lies, 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 right there, okay? Also, ascendant node, it's the people around us, the people might be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Can you trust your coworkers, your colleagues? This is really going to make a lot of people question things. Not a bad idea. So then, let's look at some other things here, okay? Let's look at, there is and I don't believe it's on here, an asteroid called Zeus, okay? An asteroid Zeus works a lot like Zeus. Now, interestingly enough, Zeus was, especially at the onset of these wars, very much in the Aries point. Right now, it's hanging out down here at almost 25 degrees, okay? It's across the way from our partners. Now, it's interesting because initially our partner might have been Ukraine under another administration, the Biden administration, but now under F45, F47, depending on how you look at it, it's not. It's probably Netanyahu in Russia. Okay, so here we have, and then, this whole thing here is talking about, and this, by the way, is Nemesis. Okay, so Nemesis is kind of out of the it's out of the Aries point, but it is talking about how that war or those partners are a problem. Okay? They are a problem. Now, the regular Zeus is in the Aries point, and it is talking again about war affecting everybody. Now, I just pulled it up in the United States. We're looking at it now, but it's everybody. We're all being affected because there's lies and disinformation and manipulation going on, and it's affecting everybody. So even when you're in a country that's, if you're anywhere in Europe, there's a concern. If you're anywhere in the Middle East, there is a concern. Okay, that takes up a lot of the world. And then, the countries that should be left alone, like Greenland, God knows. Okay, so we have some issues as a world that we're looking at that involve the war machine. Now, I am going to call it what it is because it is a war machine. There is nobody any longer in the world who is okay with war. Nobody. We're evolved. Remember the beginning of this video, and I talked about, maybe I didn't. Maybe there's so many different. I did another lecture and I talked about this. But years and years ago, people were different. It's one of the reasons why I don't have as big an interest in historical astrology. I did do a video on it way back when, the Hellenistic, which is the origins of our astrology. However, I don't really get into studying it too much because here's my example that I gave in another lecture. We, the people, are not the same as we were. We keep evolving. I'm reading a book right now called The Fourth Turning. It's about, and I always look at life as cyclical or cycles because I'm an astrologer. But it's really not a circle of a cycle. It's a spiral. So that spiral is evolving continuously. If we go back to the Bible and the beginning of the Bible, let's look at when Christ was born, okay? Christ had disciples. They try to tell you they were all men. No, they weren't. Please wipe that myth from your head. Sorry if you're a real Christian, but they don't teach you right in the Christian world. First of all, there's 88 books missing from the Bible. They're called the Dead Sea Scrolls, very informative. But one of the things that you get from the Dead Sea Scrolls is that one of the reasons why women were used or why women were there and very important was because they had intuition. At that time, 2,000 years ago, men didn't really have intuition. There was a real distinction there. That's not true anymore. I think there are men now that have more intuition than women. But that's because we evolved as people. So we look at astrology differently, we look at life differently, we look at the world differently. People are not okay with wars anymore. They're not okay with communities being dead. They're not okay with people being dead. They're just not. Whether they know the people or they don't, doesn't matter anymore. Our consciousness has risen. Thank God. Okay? So, a couple other things to look at here. First of all, again, going back to just what's in our news, but this is going to be true regardless of who you are, where you are. Now, I'm using this story, because this war, the idiot story about their bad decisions, about talking about their war strategies on a commercial app. But one of the things here is an asteroid called Wiles. Now, interestingly enough, there was a woman in that meeting with the last name of Wiles. But that's not what I use it for. I actually use it for wily behavior. Okay? Meaning not kosher, not cool. Okay? And photography. Okay, so here we have a guy gets on TV and he says, "This did not happen." Immediately, the guy who told the story, which I'm really glad he did, and I think so are a lot of other people, had photographs, screenshots. Didn't happen. Then what are these? Okay, that's in there. That is in the astrology for the world. So it makes me think the world might be interested in that little story. Okay, a couple other things that are in there that I find really interesting. We've been having a lot of issues with planes. Okay, now this is not specifically talking about planes. This is talking about transportation vehicles. There's still problems with transportation vehicles. So please be careful if you are having to travel, boats, planes, even automobiles. I mean, that's another thing. Automobiles. That's. I just said it. Wow, Tesla's in trouble. Okay, because it's in astrology now. So I think it is not just the airplanes, because it doesn't. With airplanes you would have to have Chronos and a couple other things there, but this is just vehicles. I'm going to go with cars. So that was a little. Yesterday I would have said something different, but today, yeah, there it is. Okay, the other stuff I want to talk about. I believe that many of the things that we're dealing with are because they're not right. Something isn't right. We are destined. There's destined. We are destined to melete, ponder, think about, contemplate these things. This is the whole world, people, because we the people are not just the United States. We the people are everywhere in the world. Okay, then I want to talk about, this is really interesting. Moin is a face. It's a German word. Well, we don't distinguish only English words when we do this stuff. We use every language. And one of the things I'm getting from that is faces on the hill. Now, could this be, for us, that's what we call Washington, D.C. That's the hill, okay? Now, this is the world, though. So is the world referring to it as the hill, or is there something else going on even where you live that's related to a hill? I'm going to tell you, watch the faces of the people on the hill. I think that's important. I know that there's we're in turning points. We're in a huge turning point. Not only did Chiron just hit the United States, we're having a Chiron return, literally. But Chiron is in the Aries point. That's definitely worth taking note of. Okay? That Chiron is right there. It's right there. So we're all having a turning point, people. It's healing. It's the wounded healer. It's not going to be easy. I always say healing with Chiron always comes with tears, but it is still healing. So we have some healing coming. Now, one of the things that really gets me down here is we got a lot of addictions. Okay, well, that in the case of this country is people addicted to drugs, people addicted to war, people addicted to power. Okay, but I'm going to give you a note that this is the Aries point. So it's not just the people that are on the Hill in the United States, but it makes me wonder how much the people that are on the Hill in the United States are affecting or are enabling, with Ganymede, enabling the addictions of others in other places. I can go right into this war in Israel and what they're doing to Gaza. And I think that, also, I think Russia is so empowered with Trump being in, and so is Netanyahu, that I think their atrocities could be worse. I know they are. It's, I don't think we should be falling for charm right now. I don't think people should be able to dance their way out of things. And this would be not just on a political scale, but even on a personal scale. Think about some of these big businesses, and this should not be allowed. Don't enable these people. Okay. We are more concerned with what things look like anymore. Okay. So faces showed up as mine, but also it shows up as Cupido A. Okay, so the appearances, the appearance of, the facials, the facial expressions, and what it's telling us about that. And the other things, now these are retrograde. So I'm going to go through a series of the retrogrades, okay? And then I'll go back to a couple more things that are not. Endings. It's interesting, it's retrograde. I think we are going to see a lot of endings, don't get me wrong. I just think the fact that it's retrograde might be interesting in how it ends. That's something to look for, people. And one of the weaknesses is because it's going to end because of being forced due to Achilles tendons. In other words, due to weaknesses. Weaknesses are going to begin to appear. Because of that, it's going to be added pressure. That's volcano, which acts a lot like volcanoes. So we've got Atropos, Vulcan, and we have Achilles. And they're all together. So that's Achilles is your Achilles. And Vulcan is that pressure. Volcano is that pressure to end things. And I think, let's look at it this way. For some reason, F45/47 is, I believe, trying to really, really put pressure on to end this because he would see it as his way of doing something nice or good and being productive. I don't think it's going to work that way. Again, all in retrograde. It's like somebody's coming off as, I'm a nice guy. And you're probably running into this. Everybody is. I'm a nice guy. No, you're not. And this is going to show up also at places of business where things are going downhill right now, people, for everybody. And I don't care where you are, where you live, or whatever. And I can see this like people in places, positions of authority, really like trying to charm you and be really nice to you to upgrade or updo productivity. What does that matter, right? I think that look for body images and body language during this time. You want to check on people. We need to do that. Check on people. Okay, so I'm running into this where today, later, I'll be doing some correspondence with some people who are not well. We need to do that, and they're both physically incapacitated. Diana tells us that there's going to be a lot of, and these are not any longer retrograde, these are direct, that we're really hunting right now. Some people could feel haunted by this asteroid, but I'll be honest with you, I think what people are hunting for is the truth, Rosetta, because that truth sets us free. And the truth is really important right now. Really important. I'm sorry, it's Varda. Rosetta shows up on the next lineup. So when I say the truth is important, it shows up more than once. Henderson is interesting, and so is Shiva, because of an article I just read. Apparently, and I noticed this, I did notice it. When I was growing up, everybody socialized and partied. We did it while I was, my God, up until, I'm going to say, I've become antisocial at a younger age, but I've noticed now that, and I just read an article that people don't party anymore. They're not throwing big parties anymore. I've noticed it myself. I just really feel like it's just, and I think it's where our heads are at. We're just not really there. We're not at the partying mood. We don't even know who we can trust. We've got Neptune node going on. I mean, for God's sake. Shiva is that talk about we're going to have to withdraw. And Henderson is saying we're antisocial. Shiva's saying then it's time to withdraw, because you have to withdraw or destroy something in order to rebuild it. You have to sometimes let it fall apart. You have to sometimes destroy it and walk away. But in any case, in order to rebuild ourselves, our communities, because especially here in the United States, communities have been decimated. Families have been decimated through division, disinformation. And so this is something that we really have to look at. So now I'm going to move through just to look at this. Okay, so here are the lineups of midpoints. Okay, so everything I've already talked about, but that's not the only one we have. Is right about here. So, oh, that's great. So this is where Chiron got picked up. See, here's Chiron. All right. And so, Mars. Okay. So that's Mars there. Okay. So we got Mars, we got Chiron. So I believe that our energies will be put toward creating where our energy is creating that turning point. Okay. See, these are work relationships, okay? And, Poseidon and Venus, quite an interesting kind of midpoint. Just think about what it is. Again, first of all, if you look at Venus as our social lives, then Poseidon as ideals, it would be, I want to be with people who think like I do. I do. I totally have been able to isolate myself so that I'm surrounded by people, even on Facebook. I get rid of people that I feel are troublemakers. You're off. So, you have that. But also Poseidon is also, because of its Neptune qualities, it can be so compassionate. It can be propaganda, and it could be propaganda for money. But Venus. But it can also be a higher love, a higher and more meaningful love. Which I think a lot of people are experiencing on a very psychic level, where the capacity to love is greater, okay? And I do hope we take advantage of that. I feel that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to put up with your BS. It doesn't mean I'm going to accept your ideology, but I'll send you off in love. And I like this, Node Vesta, which could be contacts that are at a distance. I'm going to send you off with love. But it could also be work relationships. Okay. Now I'm going to move to the Sun axis at this point, which, I kind of love that. Let me see if I can get this by the minute. What we're going to do is we're going to go, when this is exact at 9 degrees. I mean, it's just exact, okay? But I want to point out a couple of things here, okay? So we have an ascendant haze, which is, poverty and people struggling financially, doing without. I want to point that out, but I also have to point out the ascendant, it's a vertexual ascendant, to Kronos, okay? So remember, Kronos is heavily involved in a lot of what's going on. Because they're the ones, those are the decisions that we're living with. Okay. I want to move now into this Uranus here. Okay. It's out by, excuse me, I think about 30 minutes or a little more, but it's still in because I go a degree. I go a whole degree. And the Uranus is telling us that our connections are changing, which I believe is very true. It's also telling us that change is happening because of things that we're getting excited about. That's the Eros. Although Eros is really out, okay? But I like to talk about the fact that if it's really right conjunct or next to a planet that's in, then it shades it a bit, okay? So there's a lot of excitement that's going to cause people to make sudden decisions and sudden changes, and a lot of impulsive but yet freeing kind of moves will be made. And it's interesting because it's Sun and Moon with Uranus. Now, Moon and Uranus could be erratic feelings and emotions, and people that kind of behave erratically. And remember, it's in the first house, so it'd be very visible to everybody in this country. But for everybody around the world, how are these connections that are going on in your life changing who you are and maybe your concepts in life? There's a lot of change. Okay. And I think change is freeing, liberating, revolutionary. It's also the revolution of the people. And that's happening here for real. But I think that we're being encouraged by what's going on outside of the country as much as we're encouraging each other here in this country. So really good stuff there for most people. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to really start off with here is that the Sun-Moon conjunction is in an exact conjunction with the asteroid that I call Laplace. Laplace is about lies. Boy, have we been living with lies. And I think every chart I do features lies. And the lies are related to and coming from people who have narcissistic personality disorder. Now, in this country, definitely. But I think this is also speaking to the damage done by Elon Musk all over the world, because he's definitely fits that. And the other thing is hack. I was listening to a couple other astrologers, and they're not asteroid astrologers per se, but they're very open to them, and they do occasionally put them or the centaurs in their work. And hack is something they did a whole thing on, because hack is hack. Our elections, hacked. What is going on now? Our personal information, hacked. Okay, so here we have lies by a narcissistic personality who's hacking. Guys, I don't make this up. It doesn't get better than this. Now, other things here would be health issues. Health issues could come to your attention, whether it's your own personal health or someone close to you. And one of the things about Neptune crossing over in Aries point is that's a lot about long-term, long-standing illnesses. Could be allergies, but it could turn into other things. The asteroid Kitty's in here, and this is interesting, and I'm going to do a little more work on this. I just had a heck of a weekend. I have an animal house. I mean, 3 cats and a dog, and I can honestly tell you that it gets crazy here. I mean, literally crazy. And we had some real kitty dynamics happen this last weekend. So the fact that Kitty was in here made me laugh, and I had to include it. But Kitty's in here with the health asteroid, so please be mindful of the health of your kitties. Just a little side note. Rosetta, Narcissist, and Asteria are all retrograde. So let's talk about them. They're all together. Rosetta is the truth that sets you free. Varda, we got truth in the last set. But now we have Rosetta. It's retrograde. So it's making me again wonder, how does this truth emerge? Because it's not real direct. But it's referring to narcissist. So is the truth coming through a narcissistic behavior or through somebody who's a narcissist? Or is it regarding the truth? Is it regarding narcissists? We don't know. Asteria is prayers, meditation, contemplation. I personally be doing a lot of that. But it's also astrology. Her name means stars. So she's Asteria. She's stars in the heaven. So the astrology right now could hold a lot of the answers, especially in terms of timing of when can things happen or when can we expect things. Ironically, we did expect a leak, something to come out with this March 29th chart versus the March 14th or 15th chart. March 15th, I believe it was for us. So again, you have this energy repeating itself, okay? So with the Rosetta, the narcissist, the Asteria, and the fact that they're all in retrograde, I would say look to not just astrology, but maybe truth can come through it regarding narcissist or narcissistic behavior. But this can be true even at lower levels. I know people who work with people who are narcissistic and are narcissists. And there could be stuff related to that. So again, this is in the axis, so it doesn't totally have to relate to just politics. Excuse me. I use politics because, actually this might be better. I use politics because it's just easy. But realize that when you see something like this, that this is the sun axis itself, then it's affecting everybody who has planets at 9 cardinal, 24 fixed, or around within a degree of, 130 fixed, or 1630 mutable. Okay, so, I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's 130 fixed if we're doing them in order, and then 24 fixed. 9 cardinal, and over here 1630. So if you've got something around there, especially if it's your ascendant, your sun, your moon, your midheaven, or even your nodes, you really want to pay attention to what's going on here. Okay, so moving on, a couple of things. First of all, the next asteroid talks about, it's called Born. And what it means, and it's interesting, here in the United States, it did fall on the ascendant. But even if you're not in the United States, this 9 degrees is going to act like an ascendant to you. No matter where you live, there's going to be some aspects of this particular 9-degree sun-moon combination that will act itself out as it is a ascendant. Okay, so I'm just showing right now, this is the 24 and the 9, okay? So the other points we want to look at would be 130, let me minus, I like to go right to it, okay? Look at this, Chronos Vesta. Look at Adamita's Venus is a deep love, okay? It's also resisting love or not finding love, or so that goes both ways. So that's pretty interesting. But here's the other axis point right there. Okay. All right. So Delphi also shows up in here, and remember I told you to go look at astrology with Asteria there. Delphi is your psychics and your oracles. So again, a lot of that kind of stuff is doing really well because people need answers. Barlow tells us that there's still an element out there that's very Pollyanna. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be okay. It'll be whatever. And I think it will be. Don't get me wrong. But I think we need to do work in order to make it so. We can't be so Pollyanna. And Pollyanna is something that the other side in this country keeps trying to throw up. Just give him a chance. He's ruining our country. He's a constitutional crisis. But what? We're supposed to give him a chance. That's Pollyanna. I like the fact that Pollyanna is also running with swindle. Come on, it's going to be great. I'm just going to take all your money. You see where I'm going with this? Swindle. Okay. I am going to tell you that new talents will be born. I believe that. I truly believe that. New talents will be born. I've talked about that before. I think even new talents, but also people that have talents that have maybe worked on something for a long period of time, but then not really done much with it, might find that as we approach upon the new world, that they will actually have a place for that talent. I know that things are going slow, guys. I know that. I feel it. You guys have no idea. I'm an Aries Point Moon. I feel all of this. And no, I agree. It can't be over soon enough. But I will tell you that it really is moving slowly. Now, this next set I'm going to give you as a 4. And the reason why is because the first and the last are out by just minutes, like maybe 2 minutes to within 10 minutes, but they're out. So I don't really go that far. But just like I said with Uranus and this Eros, okay, they're still connecting to the others. So the 2 that are in here are Nakbar, which is your neighbors. Okay, now it could be your neighbor at work, could be neighbor next door, it could be a neighbor. It's your neighbors, okay? And wisdom. Now these are the 2 that are inside of this configuration, okay? Icarus starts off this. Icarus is the risk taker. Icarus sometimes flies too close to the sun. It's just the way Icarus is. It's a risk taker who sometimes flies too close to the sun with regard to neighbors and wisdom. And Patsy is telling you that there's a willing victim here. Somebody is willingly doing something that is it's victim, okay? Willingly put themselves as a victim. We could look at that different ways. I can give you some political examples again, but I think that a lot of that speaks for itself, okay? Taking risks with neighbors or because of neighbors or result of neighbors, thinking that this is wise, but really only putting yourself into a position of being a willing victim. Think about it. And then I'm going to leave you with the last 2 that I see, which are, as I started with, sort of like kind of going full circle here. Cupido, the family, the community, the art, okay? And tears for Levitina. And I say that because I feel that there are a lot of tears right now. And remember, there cannot be healing without tears. And that's where we go back to the Aries point where we saw that Chiron. And it's funny how the Aries point talked about lies and truth, and well, especially truth, and about rebuilding and pondering and all of that. Well, wiles is not the truth. So here we go. Truth and lies. And it showed up again when I did the axis of the sun. And I just want to point this out. Rosetta is completely opposite the sun-moon place. Rosetta being the truth that sets us free. 1 minute of orb. 1 minute. It's 9 Libra 01. So really interesting stuff in the skies right now. I like that even the astrology is giving us hope and letting us know what's really going on here in some respects. And that we're able to maybe look at things differently, which will help us to be more aware, more awake, and hopefully that wisdom can be used for what it really is. Not to make us willing victims, but to make us wise to what is a willing victim. And with that said, I want to thank you for watching the video, and until we meet again, as always, I wish you only happy reading.